Chapter 3. Digging for Death. I had passed out in the closet and awoke to my right leg cramping beneath me. I checked my phone's battery, which was at 65%, and fingered my pockets. The left pocket of my cardigan contained my cell and cigarettes. The right contained my box of wood matches and the green crayon. I examined the crayon in further detail using my phone's torch for light. The crayon was just a generic dollar store brand that said crayon, with a color in an all lowercase font that read Hunter Green. It had enough use to indicate that I was the first person to color with it, as it was virtually brand new. I smelled the crayon and was transported back to kindergarten and the familiar sense of construction paper and glue. Those bright, colorful posters with the alphabet printed on them and days of the week, the cartoony artwork of friendly characters holding things like apples or teddy bears. I know now why I liked school so much. It was a far cry from what home was like. A safe place where you were corrected with constructive criticism rather than a raw beating. A place where you weren't insulted for failure, but encouraged to try again. Bradley walked me to school during my first 5 grades, and the nearest bus stop was 30 minutes away. We had to go down that dirt road to the highway and walked west to the nearest populated town with a school called Graham, which actually is on a map, west of Fort Worth and south of Wichita Falls. It was a nice town and certainly larger than Loeb. In fact, I begged my mom to let us move there so I could spend time with my friends outside of school, but the answer was always a big fat no. Not that Mom didn't want to move. Lord knows she was all for it. But Dad never budged on the topic. Ever. I forced myself to kick the door to the closet open and exited it at a standing position, noting my typewriter was overturned and all of my work had bloody handprints all over it. I knew this would prove my case of not being out of my mind and used my phone to take several pictures of the room, capturing the mayhem. I even grabbed one of the bloodiest pages and took a bright photo of it while I held it. I immediately sent this to Greg along with the words, "Someone destroyed my work," before pocketing the paper sheet and heading downstairs. I took my pills and ate a sandwich before sparking a genius idea. I looked in the shed where the generator was and found a shovel. I perused the property on foot looking for a place where the earth might have been disturbed, in hopes I could find and dig up any human remains. Specifically, I looked for the little girl's grave if, in fact, it was on the property. I searched and dug in a dozen places around the gigantic lot. Frustrated and realized the Texas sun was bearing down on me here in late May, I took a break on the back porch and sat on a bench, wiping my face. If I was the killer, where would I hide a body? I took the crayon from my pocket, and then an idea struck me. If I were a killer, I would hide a body in plain sight, somewhere hard to notice and easy to overlook. I went around to the west side of the house, the building faced south, and began to look for a plant that matched the crayon color. Nothing there, so I walked around the house and up against the porch that wrapped around the house, and found a bush on the east side of it up against it I had never noticed before, and began digging away. After digging for a while, I felt something hard hit the shovel and paused. Something black and shiny hit my shovel. I swallowed hard, wiped sweat from my brow, and got on my knees. A little Mary Jane shoe was among the compacted soil, and inside the shoe was a whole lot of dirt and a small piece of bone. The part where an ankle would be looked jagged, as though it were cut with a saw. Hyperventilating, I ran to my car and dropped the shoe on the ground. I still didn't prove my dad was her killer, but I definitely confirmed she had been buried on the property. I couldn't get the door open because my keys were upstairs. I continued to spiral into emotional overdrive until I heard a familiar sound, the rattling of a metal chain. I froze completely. The dog from earlier was back and growling at me. "Please, God," I begged, and slowly backed towards the door of the house. Just then, the black guy who I gave $20 came from out of nowhere and whistled at the dog. "Rocky, heel!" he commanded in a deep voice. The dog sat and stopped growling. To my surprise, it seemed to forget all about me. He walked right up to the furry monster and stroked him behind the ears. He then motioned me close. "He won't bite you, I promise. We're cool." "I don't trust either of you," I squawked as tears rolled down my cheeks. "Get that damn dog away from me." He approached me with the dog and I scrambled for the front door, pulling at the knob in a vain attempt to enter. I had locked myself out. I collapsed on the ground, shielding my face with my arms and whimpering. "No, please, don't hurt me." "It's cool," he repeated in a matter-of-fact tone. "Bradley Kane was my best friend. You're his little sister, right, Sam?" I was still whimpering like a sissy, but calmed down just a tiny bit to ask, "You, new brother? You seriously don't remember me?" he asked with a smile. He put out his right hand and approached the porch with his dog. I stood and flattened myself against it. The dog licked my left hand and I cringed, expecting the pit bull to tear my hand to shreds at the drop of a hat. I still refused to acknowledge the guy's handshake. "He likes you," he said to me. I suddenly remembered Bradley's little unit of friends and remembered only one African-American guy he used to hang out with. "Alex?" I asked. "Is your name Alex McDonald?" He smiled ear to ear. "You do remember," he stated. "And this is Rocky." I merely waved hello, but still refused to relax around the dog. "Sorry to scare you," he said. "Loeb is a ghost town, and I'm the only inhabitant left." "Why haven't you left?" I asked with a trembling inflection. "Because I'm trying to catch him," he said. "The Loeb Ripper." I laughed hard. "Yeah, well, you could start with the little girl under the bush over that way." "Is that where she was buried?" he asked. He used a key in his pocket to enter my childhood home and held the door open for me. "I got a key for every building in the town. All 3. I bolted inside and he followed calmly. I immediately began packing all of my belongings and papers, starting with the typewriter. "So, you became a writer," he said, making it to the doorway. "Bradley always bragged about you." "Sorry, I really don't mean to be rude, but I'm getting the fuck out of here," I said hastily. "Bradley's toying with me from beyond the grave. Some little girl ghost zombie thing attacked me." "Attacked?" he asked. I laughed nervously. "Calling me a liar?" I spat. I raised my shirt and showed him my waist, which had a big bloody bruise on it. "She took a chunk out of me." "Sweet Jesus, this is bad," he said. "They're usually docile." "What in the hell are you talking about?" I asked angrily as I gathered my blood-stained manuscript. He lifted up a page with the bloody handprints and let the dog sniff it before I snatched it away. The dog looked confused and walked in circles while whining. "So Amanda attacked you," he said. "She was one of the earliest victims, brought here by the Ripper. As far as I could tell, she was brought here to be tortured and killed. I found her dead body in the room next to Bradley's old room and went to authorities and was ran through the system. When I was cleared for the crime, they came looking for the body and couldn't find her. They thought I was just some crazy and let me go. But people kept turning up dead. A couple of women, a handful of men, and a lot of kids. All likely buried on this property or on others. But Loeb is not a good place to live. I warned you because I'd hate to see you dead on these grounds." "Well, Alex, I've had quite enough of this place and all of its mind tricks," I said. My typewriter was packed and everything else was crammed into my messenger bag. "I'm done." As I bolted past him out of the room, he turned and called out, "You need to stay." I stopped halfway down the staircase and looked up at him as he popped into view at the banister railing. "First you're telling me I should leave. Now you want me to stay? You talk to the spirits, right?" My jaw hung open, but I played dumb because the idea of talking to supernatural entities sounded stupider than hallucinating them. "I thought I did. The one that bit me gave me this." I reached into my pocket and held up the green crayon, which made him speechless. I smirked. "I bet you really don't believe me." "Oh, I believe you," he stated calmly and descended the stairs until we stood next to each other. "And that's the key to finding out who did all this." On a gamble, I blurted out, "I think my dad killed Bradley." "Someone killed Bradley," he corrected me. "Not that I'm defending that asshole, just saying it may have been him. It might not, but Bradley's death was absolutely not suicide." "You weren't around my dad enough to know him," I stated. He laughed at this statement and claimed in a chuckle, "Yeah, well, I may not have been around a lot, but I was around enough for your dad to know I was the only colored kid for 30 miles. I rubbed my temples in embarrassment. "My dad actually said way worse about people of color. Yet another reason to add to the list of reasons to not like him as a person." "Who could have killed Bradley then?" "That's what I'm trying to find out," he stated as though he were tired of repeating himself. "The killer has dumped lots of bodies here, and even though I hang around as a sole citizen, I've never caught them in the act. But they have a lot of time, enough to dig a hole under a bush and bury a kid, apparently." I remember the shoe and how it had a bony foot inside. "She could have been dismembered," I suggested. "But as far as I'm concerned, screw this place, all 20 acres of it. More people are gonna die," he stated as I continued towards my car. "Maybe that'll learn him to stay away from here," I called. I got in the car and turned the key after loading in my stuff. The messenger bag sat in the passenger seat, arranged to my liking, and as I started backing out of the driveway, the car stopped moving. The hell? I mumbled to myself. All of the gauges were normal except one. The gas needle was all the way down. Bullshit! I filled it up yesterday at that station just outside of town. The couple, Loretta and Harold? He asked me, coming to the window. They died too. I looked at Alex with my perplexed expression, unlike any my face was capable of forming up to this point. But I gave them money. She took it out of my hand. I then remembered something. It was pouring when she came out, and her hair and her clothes, well, they were dry as a bone. It couldn't be true. There was no way that even the pumps would function. Then again, all of my stuff was in my room when I arrived, and I saw that little girl, even though nothing was actually in it when she disappeared, aside from a desk and a bed. I got out of the car and took my phone and cigarettes with me. We're going to the gas station, I told him. Got a vehicle? He smiled and guided me to a beat-up pickup truck on one of the other properties. An old Chevrolet from the 70s with fading blue paint that had mostly turned to rust. It had a manual transmission, so he drove because I don't like driving stick. As we drove, he did all of the talking while I sat there silently, occasionally glancing at him or nodding at the comments he made. So when did you get out of here? 16? Must have been around, 1988? He had a charming smile even though his teeth were in bad shape. My folks got sick here and I stayed to take care of them. Mom passed away 10 years ago. Dad a year before her. She kept telling me to leave and find somebody, settle down, have kids. I was not into any of that. The land is decent for growing crops, not the best. Got a good potato harvest, some corn and peppers. It takes a lot of water, though, more than what falls from the sky. I nodded. I pointed to the gas station as the speck entered my field of vision. That's it! I exclaimed. He pulled over to the exact pump I used. I leapt out of the vehicle and approached the small building. No one was inside and the door was locked. Huh? I don't understand. Someone found them dead inside. Gunshots to the back of the head. Shot execution style, Alex stated. I don't know if it was a robbery or if the person responsible wanted only to kill. I looked around where the vehicle was parked and saw my 220s against the grass by the pavement, soaked by water. I lifted them both up and examined them. This is the money I handed her out the window. Alex went over to the pump and squeezed the handle. No gas came out. Pumps are dry, he stated. You say both of them came out and the pump was $30-some? $32.18, I corrected calmly. I have an eidetic memory. One of the blessings and curses of being brought up in a traumatic environment. But as much as I remember, some things you just can't forget no matter how badly you want to. I walked around to the front of the building and tried the door. It was locked, and the white wooden door with a large window at about chest level to the top of my head set in it proved to have little visibility. Not only was there a crude curtain hanging inside, but it was pitch black. I felt like a damn fool after bringing Alex all this way and slumped with my back against the door. Impossible, I said in total disbelief. What's wrong with me? Alex approached me and offered his hand. His dog stayed obediently in the pickup truck. The windows were lowered to half their height. It's not you, it's this place, he assured me. Anyone who comes here leaves with scars. I buried my face in my hands. Not crying, surprisingly, but just trying to rationalize everything. Has Bradley appeared to you? In his old room, once, Alex said. I was cleaning the house up after the Ripper killed that little girl, and he was sitting on his bed. Everything was in his room, like he was 16 again. I smelled decay every time I walked past, I moaned. I'll never forget that smell. It was summer, and Bradley had gotten into a huge fight with Dad. Dad hit Mom in the face and threw a pipe wrench at her and missed. He ran into the kitchen, our protector, and socked Dad real good right in the mouth. He said, "You ever touch that wrench again, I'll cave your damn skull in with it." But Dad was able to tank damage like a pro boxer. Bradley tried to mess him up, but he underestimated how much of a brick wall he was. Dad kicked him around really badly, to the point Bradley ran up to his room and just cried. I went and held his hand and hugged him while Dad resumed his fight with Mom, and that was when Bradley told me we would be running away together, me and him. He would leave first and come back for me. Was that the night he died? Alex asked. I nodded and took out a cigarette. Out of courtesy, I offered one to Alex and lit them both with one of my wooden matches. I put out the match and crushed it under my right foot. As I took a drag, I had literal flashbacks of those 2 days he was gone. Bradley didn't come down for breakfast the next morning, or dinner, or lunch. His room was empty, but we didn't check the closet. I continued. The day after, I smelled a dead animal and looked everywhere for it. The only place left to look was Bradley's room. The stench was originating from his closet. I began to sob as the events became more vivid than ever. I froze at the door because I knew it wasn't an animal. The room was hotter than an oven, and we didn't have air conditioning. I remember mustering up the courage to go into his room in the first place, and I broke down completely at this point and buried my face in my hands. Brother, why? Alex rubbed my back. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I never knew that was how it happened. I blubbered hard and removed my glasses to wipe the tears from my flooded eyes. Mom called the police, and it took them about 2 hours to arrive. By then, they found Daddy drunk on the porch, and me just standing there completely catatonic, staring at this dead kid hanging by a belt in the closet. And Mom was outside because the smell was way too bad. Even though we ended up soaking the place in Pine Sol and bleach, the smell, the stench, the rot of human decay never left. I sighed deeply, my voice quivering with every word. Hate that fucking house. I'm sorry for all the people the Ripper killed, but the house could just burn to the ground and I'd raise a glass to it with a merry of a jig as I could do with a prosthesis on. He nodded. I agree completely, sister, he told me. I wiped my eyes again and tried to stand. Alex stood first and helped me. That was when he noticed my prosthesis. What happened to your leg? Oh, now that is a hell of a story, I said. See, my husband and I owned this horse stable when I made my first fortune in the 90s. I always rode the horses whenever he was around, but one night in particular when he was with his friends, I went out for a ride. The horse buckled a while into riding and tumbled with me still on her back, mangling my left foot in the process and landing on my leg, snapped the calf in two. With me and the horse both having a broken leg, we were there and I was pinned until he came home a few hours later. It got infected, and it took half a dozen paramedics to lift the horse high enough for me to be pulled out. The infection hit the bone, and they were forced to amputate below the knee. 2 years later, the infection was still present, so they cut 2 inches above the knee. So I bought the most expensive prosthetic I could afford. Damn. So do you still like horses? Not particularly. I can't ride like I used to. Jesus. How did you survive? Oh, I was depressed because I felt useless even after I got the prosthesis. But eventually it felt like I never even lost my leg. Want to see? He cringed. I pulled up my pant leg and showed him the metal and plastic leg. Amazing, he commented, but barely looked. No offense, but amputation freaks me out. And finding a dead body doesn't? I asked jokingly. He shook his head and took a long drag off of his cigarette. Finding a body is the most shocking thing ever, and it's happened to me more than once. We both made it back to the truck and I asked him point blank, do you see the dead people too? Like they're ghosts or whatever? Yeah, he said. I try to keep away because even though I see and hear them, they're angry. They've been docile for years, even around people who came here to explore. Of course, those people either leave scared or don't run into anyone. I'm glad you said that, I said, finishing my cigarette and crushing it in his ashtray. I'm taking fistfuls of pills a day and I feel like I'm going insane. Figured I was only able to see him because I got 1 foot in the grave. I see what you did there, Alex responded with a chuckle, pointing to my prosthesis. No, they appear whenever they want attention. And trust me, you'd be pissed off too if your future was stolen from you by some maniac. I completely agreed. We went back to the house and I decided to see if I could make it another night. After all, I was technically stranded. I got back to the house, poured us both some whiskey and ate some egg salad sandwiches. Then he went his way, and I began working on the story again from scratch, making sure to put the completed pages in my messenger bag and keeping the bag in my car so those vindictive wisps couldn't defile it. At 9 p.m., my cell rang, but I had been lying on my old bed taking a power nap. I answered to a very panicky Greg. Babe, we've got a problem. Not more bad news, Greg, I pleaded as I sat up and grabbed my glasses. He sighed deeply. I got your pictures, and frankly, the publisher thinks you're doing everything in your power to stall. The hell I am! I screamed into the phone. I would never! I started the second draft, I am 4 chapters in and guarding this shit with my life. I told them exactly that. I told them you were hard at work and there was some sort of misunderstanding that would be sorted out once it was done. Yeah, that's technically true, I said. You wouldn't believe me if I told you the truth anyway. Try me. I shrugged and with a straight face told him, the spirits of the Lobe Rippers victims are trying to get me to leave this place. And I would, but I'm on a roll with a story, and this is a second draft is killer. Pun intended. Wow, Greg commented. You must be getting shit-faced on a regular basis to write that good. Are you supposed to mix your meds with the booze? First of all, how dare you call my substance abuse into question? And second of all, I will repeat myself. I write fiction, but when it comes to this, I swear I am telling God's honest truth. Something is in this house, and I can prove it. We found a corpse earlier. We? Greg cried. And a corpse? Did you call the cops? Well, I found a foot, technically, I backpedaled. A little girl's shoe with a bony foot in it. Sweet Jesus of Nazareth, Greg gasped in horror. You're sure that isn't some Native American burial ground? It would explain a lot. To my knowledge, I said, this place was a burial site for Confederate soldiers during the Civil War. This house is said to have been a makeshift chapel and later home to a Confederate general, but no proof going either way. Apparently, this house is that son of a bitch's favorite dump site. If you're telling the truth, I wonder where he is and why he does it there. I shrugged. I know he dumps bodies here because no one lives here. The nearest police station is a good hour away, maybe less. All right, Greg muttered. So do me a favor, love. Please be careful, and if you need anything, including a ride home, don't hesitate to call. Thanks, I said sweetly. Why couldn't I ever find a guy like you? Because you're attracted to toxic masculinity, he stated. He wasn't wrong. All the men I was with either partook in date rape, wife-beating, extortion, cheating, or all of the above. I even had a boyfriend once who was having an affair with another man. He was my daughter's father and decided to leave us for a dude who was a writer as well and happened to earn more than I did. Joke's on him, though. They divorced and he owed alimony and child support. As I hung up with Greg, I realized just how tired I was and laid back down. I left all of the lights on, though. I felt safer that way. I also stuck cotton in my nostrils to keep from smelling that odor of death that occurred at random every once in a while, and I slept with my cane in case that little girl came back with a grudge.